Hello. I paid $30 to watch the live action, low quality version of Mulan. Mulan is the live action remake to the 1998 animated classic and is now directed by Niki Caro and stars Liu Yifei as the new Mulan. The story follows the same approach as the original, with Mulan taking her father's place in the Chinese army to fight the Huns. The original movie is one of my most favorite Disney films of all time, and as a kid, I watched it many more times than I can count, and I could just recall everything that happens. And nowadays, I even revisit it on occasion, and it just gets better and better every time I watch it. And honestly, I think it's one of the best Disney films out there, considering it has so many great messages for everybody, especially for young little girls. And over the years, it seems like it's grown quite the fan base, and in recent years, it seems to have grown a lot more in popularity. And of course, Disney had to jump on the bandwagon of making live action remakes, and now they had to do the same treatment with Mulan. And I can definitely say that I was pretty excited for this remake, not just because it was a Mulan live action remake, but after watching the trailer and seeing that it was going to be taking the approach of a Chinese war film with a much more serious tone, I gotta say that it definitely got my attention. Of course, like most fans, I was pretty upset considering the fact that they were going to be taking out certain parts that made the animated version so great, such as Mushu, the songs, and the comedy. But, I was able to overlook that fact considering that Mulan was going to be taking a new approach to its story. Well, I gotta say that this remake suffers the same exact problems that the other ones did by following the same beats of the story and not realizing what made the first film so great. And obviously, it's just another cash grab, considering Disney Plus is making us pay $30, which honestly wasn't worth it. Of course, that's not to say that there wasn't anything that I enjoyed about this film, and in fact, there were a couple of things that definitely stood out. One thing being how they focused more on the Chinese culture, and with a full Asian cast, it definitely felt more authentic to me. And the setting of China itself was actually really, really beautiful, and a lot of the visuals on display were really pretty to look at. And whenever they went into the aspects of war in this movie, they definitely took a philosophical approach, which was definitely very interesting to me. I also noticed that they did some little nods to the original. Obviously, they replaced Mushu in this movie with a phoenix, which was visually pretty to look at, but they didn't really end up doing anything with the phoenix, so it kind of felt like it just was there. But there was also a moment where they stumble upon a Chinese village that's just been ravaged by the Huns, and I noticed that there was a dragon that kind of resembled Mushu, which was pretty touching to me. And something else they did was they ended up taking the songs and they ended up making them into spoken format, and they kind of shortened it a little bit, but that was a little nice thing to see. As for the war aspects of this movie, I gotta say that most of the fight scenes were definitely well choreographed, and during the training sequences, those were really fun to watch as well, and they even ended up saying, "We're gonna make men out of you," which was a nice fitting touch for one of the best songs in Disney history. However, with some of the fight scenes, while the cinematography was unique, there were times where it did feel a little bit nauseating to me, considering they took the approach of rotating the camera a whole bunch of times, and honestly, it just made me feel dizzy every time. It was unique, but oh god, they did it way too much in this movie. Also, with some of the fight scenes, they do some really over-the-top stunts by running on walls and such. And there's also a really silly scene where they end up using curtains as a weapon, and it's just used in the most over-the-top way possible, which it's weird considering that the live-action one should be more set in reality when it feels more based in fantasy. And look, I understand that it's Disney and this movie is set a little bit more towards kids, but it's still weird to see that a live-action version can't be a little bit more realistic than an animated version. Other than that, though, that's really the only bit of positive that I can give to this movie, because there's a lot of things that stood out to me. One thing in particular being the villain. If you may or may not remember, Shan Yu in the original version was already one of the most bland villains in Disney history, considering all he talked about was just killing people. His design was super generic. All he did was spew out random generic villain lines, and he just wasn't that memorable to begin with. In this version of Mulan, the villain isn't anything special either, and he doesn't really do a whole lot that's memorable, and even with the name change, I still can't remember his name. Oh yeah, and do you remember that little sidekick hawk with Shan Yu in the original version? Well, now they ended up turning her into a villain, because now the hawk is like some kind of witch that can transform into a human form, then into a hawk. And in the movie, she ends up saying that she's trapped with the new Shan Yu, but it's kind of weird considering the fact that she's a lot more powerful than all of China combined, so she could easily take over, but she doesn't do anything about it. On top of all that, they have her do this thing where she tries to relate with Mulan, and then she says, "Join me and we can rule China together," and blah blah blah. But overall, there was just nothing memorable about this witch villain, and honestly, I don't know why she was in this movie to begin with. It seems like Disney is always adding these new things, but they never follow through with any of them and just push them off to the side. But probably the biggest issue that I had with this new version of Mulan is how it completely betrays what made the original one so great. I think Mulan has one of the best story arcs in the Disney Princess lineup, but in this version of Mulan, it seems like they take that story and just follow it beat for beat while trying to make you nostalgic. Right when this movie started, I was immediately put off by the beginning scene as I saw a young Mulan who was already a skilled fighter, and it felt like they were giving her the Rey treatment. You know, that treatment where they make a strong female lead who's practically perfect in every way because they want to avoid being sexist, which already sounds very sexist in my opinion. Everything that the original Mulan worked for in the animated version is just completely thrown out the window, and now this version is all about channeling your chi, which to me seems like a very lazy way to show growth, and now Mulan can just do the impossible. Now this version of Mulan can just seamlessly run on walls, she can just kick arrows in the air and kill people with it, and she's just made as a perfect character, which is not what the original Mulan was. The original Mulan was clumsy, she wasn't accustomed to the Chinese culture, and all she wanted to do was bring honor to her family, but she was struggling with her identity. Before joining the army, Mulan doesn't have any of that fighting experience, but after going through so much hard work, training, and dedication, with some failure along the way, she was able to build up that strength and discipline, just like all the other guys did. And when she ends up saving China at the end of that movie, it's so compelling because she was able to prove that she could go against the gender stereotype, reveal its flaws, and bring honor to her family. But all of that is just thrown out the window because the live action version of the story never really follows through with the emotional beats. It rushes almost every scene and it sets itself up for failure in the very beginning, which is something that the live action Mulan doesn't even face. She's already set up as a super skilled fighter in the beginning of the movie, and in the very middle of it, she ends up failing during a training sequence, but she overcomes that by channeling her chi, which honestly feels really, really lazy to me, and it feels like she was having more of a bad day rather than growing. The animated one was able to show that women had just as much strength and discipline than guys did, and when Mulan ends up reaching the top of that pole in the animated version, it's honestly very, very compelling. The live action version of the story is proving that Mulan is able to channel her chi better, and now the pole climbing scene is replaced with her climbing up some stairs with some buckets, which honestly felt really, really weak and empty to me, considering the fact that we never actually see her grow as a character. And it doesn't help that there's practically no emotional moments throughout the story, which seems to be a trend with the Disney remakes. In my opinion, I think the animated version of Mulan does a much better job when it comes to emotional moments. It actually takes its time with the scenes, we're able to see the right emotion on display with the characters, and the voice performances of the actors help elevate those moments. In this version, it still shows those moments, but it doesn't give you enough time to process what just happened, so you can't really feel anything for the characters. Remember in the matchmaker scene where Mulan is struggling to follow the instructions given to her, and after that she ends up failing and being told that she'll never bring honor to her family?
You may look like a bride, but you will never bring your family honor!
After this, Mulan sings the song Reflection, where it shows her struggling with her identity. It conveys the message perfectly, and you can feel for her. In this version, though, Mulan ends up screwing up because of a spider out of all things. So it never really shows her failing to follow the customs set for women. And even with that, they end up rushing into the next scene where the army is trying to find men from each family. So the emotional beats just never hit. Also, remember in the animated version of Mulan where she ends up taking her father's place in the army, where we see her struggling with that decision in the rain. She ends up being told that she has to find her place, and then we get to see the epic transformation scene. Well, that's just thrown out the window too. In this version, we just see Mulan playing with a sword, and then she looks at her father's armor, and then suddenly she just has it on in the next scene, and then she just leaves. It feels like that version of the movie is just taking the scenes from the original, putting it in there, and failing to understand why they work so well. I mean, think about it. Mulan is essentially risking her life, and she's breaking the law, and she has to second guess herself, but she'll do whatever it takes to bring honor to her family and protect her father. But in the live action version, she just puts on the armor, and then she walks away with no second guesses, and it's just like, see ya, father. And what brings the emotional moments down even more is the actress playing Mulan, and I really hate to say that. Despite her being a voiceover in the original version, I honestly think Ming-Na Wen did a much better job in displaying the emotional scenes rather than Liu Yifei. This is what she ends up doing in this version. Yes, I will bring honor to us all. It is my duty to fight. Please, execute me now. She honestly sounds like a robot through this entire movie, and it just feels off. I know that there's a lot of people out there that happen to like this movie, but for me, it was such a disappointing film, and it just feels like such a big insult to the animated version. The reason why these remakes keep on going downhill is because they never really understand what made the animated version so great. Mulan is one of my favorite Disney movies, and it has so many great messages for kids and adults, and it also does a great job in making a compelling role model out of Mulan. The remake can work as a war film, but it feels like it just follows the beats of the original and doesn't follow through with the emotions or the scenes of Mulan growing. What's even funnier is that this version of Mulan is 20 minutes longer, but it ends up cutting down on the emotional scenes, and it ends up needlessly extending other ones. I can overlook the removal of the songs, Mushu, and the comedy, but removing the development that made Mulan in the original so great, that I can't forgive. And I hate to say it, but we've officially lost Mulan to modern day Disney. The animated version of Mulan will never be replaced and will remain the definitive version for years to come, whereas this one is just another excuse for a cash grab. So dishonor on you, Mulan. You get 4 out of 10 yin-yangs.
I'm Hua Mulan. I will bring honor to us all.
But anyways, I'd like to know, what do you guys think of the live action Mulan? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Not care to watch it? I'd love to know in the comments below. And if you made it this far in the video, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more future movie content. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this review. Look forward to more very soon. And until the next one, you guys, I'll see you later.